Wrong time of year, wrong city, but in Brasilia overnight it was carnival time, at least for the opponents of Jair Bolsonaro. Partying on the more familiar streets of Rio de Janeiro too. Celebration of the conviction of the former president and his co-conspirators for plotting a coup after losing the election of 2022.
Dia histórico, né? Porque
It's a historic day because, to my knowledge, few countries in the world have convicted former presidents and high-ranking military officers, let alone sentenced them to more than 20 years in prison.
But the sentencing of such a polarising figure was always going to be a moment of division. For Bolsonaro's supporters, sadness and galvanising anger at what they see as political persecution.
I believe that God will raise up someone and that it will be Donald Trump to rescue our president from this injustice.
The friction point of Brazil's political fault lines, the Supreme Court, where 4 of 5 justices ruled against the former president.
The defendant, Jair Messias Bolsonaro, was convicted by a majority of the crimes here specific to leading an armed criminal organization. In addition to attempted violent abolition of the democratic rule of law, coup d'etat, damage qualified by violence and serious threat against the union's property.
Chief Justice Moraes was, the prosecution said, to be executed if the plot had come to fruition. Instead, it was he who sentenced Bolsonaro to 27 years and 3 months in prison. Earlier in the day, not for the first time, Bolsonaro allowed himself to be photographed in defiant pose at the home where he's been under house arrest for more than a month. The case against him was that he incited the assault on the National Congress and other federal buildings in January 2023 in the hope that the military would intervene and restore him to power. He'd lost the election of the previous October to Brazil's current president, left-winger Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. The court found that he was aware that Lula and his running mate were to be assassinated as part of the conspiracy. But it was not a unanimous verdict. On Wednesday, Justice Luis Fux spent 11 hours detailing his vote against the conviction. That could help any appeal. Bolsonaro's lawyers want the full panel of 11 Supreme Court judges to reconsider the case, while his congressman's son is calling on Parliament to act.
Let us now, with all our strength, unite Parliament, which has the power to promote peace in this country and grant a broad, general and unrestricted amnesty for all, including Bolsonaro.
A third avenue, US pressure, is being pushed by another Bolsonaro son, Eduardo, now in the States full-time, lobbying the Trump administration. The US president has already imposed 50% tariffs on Brazil and sanctioned the Chief Justice, calling the proceedings against Bolsonaro a witch hunt.
Well, I watched that trial. I know him pretty well. Foreign leader. I thought he was a good president of Brazil. And it's very surprising that that could happen. That's very much like they tried to do with me, but they didn't get away with it at all.
There are indeed parallels aplenty between Trump and Bolsonaro, both iconoclastic conservatives who rode a populist wave to power, both surviving assassination attempts on the campaign trail. Bolsonaro's stabbing in 2018, leaving him with continuing health problems. Both domestically divisive. Bolsonaro's opponents citing, among other things, his dismissal of COVID-19 as a little flu when his country became one of the hardest hit in the pandemic. And if his own hopes of a Trumpian presidential comeback are now ever more quixotic, he still has a sizable constituency for a potential successor to inherit ahead of next year's election. Well, I'm joined now by John Bartlett, a freelance journalist who covers South American politics. John, thank you very much for joining us. This trial is ended, but the political fallout not over. I mean, where do you think things go from here in Brazil?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a fascinating question. I think this is, one of these true sort of watershed moments, not only for Brazil but also for for Latin America, and I think perhaps even the whole of the Western Hemisphere, looking at the potential implications for Donald Trump, looking at the similarities between what happened in Brazil and what happened in the US. But reaction so far has been more or less as expected. We've seen the leftists in Latin America. There have been strong fraternal ties between Gabriel Boric, for example, the left-wing president in Chile, who president of Chile, where I'm based, and Lula, the current president of Brazil. And he's congratulated Brazil, for example, on seeing justice through. And I think that's the kind of reaction we're likely to see, and it will be divided along sort of traditional lines around the region.
And in Brazil itself, I mean, we have these comments from his defense, Bolsonaro's defense, talking about an appeal, his sons talking about amnesty or US pressure. I mean, are there avenues for him to challenge this realistically?
There are avenues to challenge this. I think particularly in terms of the sentence, which is 27 years and 3 months in jail. He was, of course, the subject of, depending on how you see it, an assassination attempt when he was campaigning for the presidency last time. He was stabbed in the stomach, and that led to all sorts of health complications afterwards. So I think he'll serve some of it under house arrest. But yes, I think that the Bolsonaro dynasty, I mean, he's been priming his sons in particular to kind of take over from him and create this sort of it's very hard not to make the Trump parallel, but the sort of Trump-like dynasty, I think, in Brazilian politics to take over on the right. But one interesting thing, I think, is that that this leaves the right in Brazil without a significant figurehead at the moment. So I think that's what we're going to see now, to see who takes over from him. Whether it's one of his sons or somebody else can step into that void.
So his talk of challenging his political ban, of challenging this sentence and standing himself in 26, do you think that's not going to play?
I think that's unlikely. I think that this, the sentence won't be quashed. I think the best he can hope for is not to serve time in jail, but actually under house arrest instead. But I think that Bolsonaro is not going to run in 2026. I wouldn't have thought.
And you picked up on the parallels between Bolsonaro and Trump. I mean, Trump making them himself overnight, talking about it being similar to what had been done to him. There's already been this somewhat legally dubious imposition of 50% tariffs on Brazil. They've sanctioned the Chief Justice. Could there be more US pressure in the offing, do you think? That's clearly what at least one of his sons is calling for.
There certainly could be. I think that all I've seen from Trump so far is that he said he was very surprised by the conviction. If I were him, I would be starting to wonder what the implications could be, in the US. But Brazil has gone about this in legally, at least, in an impeccable way. They've managed to convict Bolsonaro and his 7 co-defendants, many of whom were from the military, on a range of charges. So I think that the parallels are incredibly similar. I mean, we have to remember as well that this was one of the most interesting things about this trial, and I think it's had all of Brazil and all of Latin America kind of glued to their phone screens. That this was broadcast on YouTube. This whole trial, a lot of the deliberations were broadcast. They were all broadcast live as well. One of the judges spoke, I think, for 13 hours. I mean, this is incredible. This incredible kind of level of transparency and access, and I think that's drawn a lot of praise. On the one hand, but it's also kind of rebounded a little bit back to exactly what happened in the US. I mean, we have to remember that after the storming of the Capitol building in Washington, the January the 6th riots, almost the same thing happened in January 2023 in Brazil. So the parallels are alarming.
Well, quite. I mean, how severe and potentially dangerous are the political divisions inside Brazil? Because I mean, the other parallel that people may draw is both that Trump himself and Bolsonaro suffered attempts on their life, even if we don't know the motivation. Certainly in the latter case, were certainly political. And we have seen just this week this really quite terrifying eruption of political violence, or instance of political violence in the United States. Is there a danger of the divisions turning violent in Brazil now?
Political violence is not It's nothing new in Brazil. I mean, this is a country that's suffered numerous coup d'etat over the years. It's suffered under dictatorships as well, albeit lesser known than perhaps they have been in Chile and Argentina and other parts of Latin America. In sort of the context of the Cold War in the 1970s and 80s. But it's very interesting, this sort of reflection of political violence, because I think this is something that works both ways as well. The influences are not purely not the US on Brazil or Brazil rebounding to the US, because we've seen recently that the American flag has become a symbol in the right in Brazil in particular. There were these huge marches over the weekend that we saw this massive American flag unveiled on Paulista Avenue, which is one of the main thoroughfares, or the main thoroughfare in Sao Paulo. So it's very interesting to see how these two cases are mirroring one another. With regard to future political violence, I mean, yeah, I don't see why I don't see how that's really avoidable in Brazil. It's an incredibly highly charged situation in the country, and the country is so incredibly divided. I mean, Bolsonaro, we have to remember, only very narrowly lost in the elections last time round to Lula da Silva, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who's the current president, the leftist, former union leader. So this is not a situation that's going to go away anytime soon. Obviously, we're hoping that it doesn't lead to further political violence.
So we've just witnessed a major moment in Brazilian politics, and obviously plenty still to be watching out for. John Bartlett, thank you very much for your time and your insights today.